And here's Heidi.
Yes. My name is Heidi Waterhouse. I am a technical writer coming out of Minneapolis, and I am here to talk to you about Searchfirst technical writing, or Searchfirst documentation. So on January 2nd, I had a problem. How many of you use FrameMaker? Anybody? Anybody? On January 2nd, do you know what happened? FrameMaker 10 failed. They had a Y2K problem. It was a 2013 problem. It failed with a completely opaque error message that said your licensing had expired. I was like, I kind of need that to work. All of the documentation is in that. I didn't even think they had a license expired. So I Googled on Google on Adobe Technical Communication Suite 4 and nothing. And I Googled on license expired and nothing. And I searched the product help. Well, no, I didn't, because I was locked out. The licensing had locked me out of the help, which is always helpful. I called my IT, and they were a little cranky because it was the new year, and they'd just been through budgeting, and they're a little cross. And they said, oh, we didn't think it expired. Why don't you try re-downloading Adobe Technical Communication Suite, and we'll send you the new license key. 6 hours later, because I was working from home, I finally got my new install and applied the new license key, and nothing. By then, of course, it was after Adobe Technical Communication support times, so I called in and left a message. And 2 days later, and 3 phone transfers, I finally found somebody who said, oh yeah, we have that problem. Let me send you a patch. So I had spent the better part of 3 days and some Adobe money on getting this problem fixed because I was angry. I would have quit if I hadn't needed that particular piece of software so badly. I tried all 3 traditional methods of getting answers out of somebody, and they all failed me. So I was coming to them angry. I think a lot of our users are coming to documentation angry, or at least upset, because they can't get the software to do what it is they're looking for it to do. If the interface were completely intuitive, they would never read the documentation, and they would be happier, and we would, move on with our lives and write API docs for people who actually want to read documentation. So in 1995, when I started writing, is that centered? Yes. We started writing table of contents docs, and I thought it was the best thing ever because we weren't just describing the buttons on the screen. Instead, we wrote an outline of how it was going to be. This was the introduction, and this was the installation, and this was how you ran it. And it was amazing. I wasn't just describing the interface. I was organizing the document into a logical structure and giving it a table of contents and giving it an index and making it all discoverable, although I don't think we used that word then. It was great. On the plus side of table of contents documents, they're searchable and easy to index and cross-reference, like our previous speaker was saying. He said, it doesn't matter how long the book is because you can find it because it's in the table of contents. And there's a known documentation path and structure for how to build a table of contents type book. Everybody knows how to do this. We kind of teach it in 5th grade. And it's easy to distribute this chapter to you and this chapter to you and spread it out among a lot of writers. But there's too much fluff. We sort of get carried away with filling in all the slots that we've put down in our table of contents order of outline. We could put things in all of those. It'd be great. In fact, I know 3 ways to do that one process, and I'm going to put them all in because there's no disincentive. My favorite piece of writing advice comes from a book on fly fishing. It's called A River Runs Through It, and it's by Norman Maclean. And he has a gruff newspaper editor say to a cub reporter about his first story, good, now half. Good, now half. This is like my whole documentation life. If I could make documentation that was actually really only 1 page long and conveyed all the necessary information, I would be the happiest writer in the world. But I haven't gotten to that point yet, so I keep working on it. If you do the whole table of contents style with the indexing and everything, you end up with what I call IBM documentation. Who here has ever tried to find help on IBM WebSphere? Right? These people have felt my pain because it's there. You know it's there. They have written the documents, but you don't know where. I know someone who's a sysadmin who says when she has Cognos problems, she just calls tech support, and tech support sends her to the link where she can find the documentation that was already there, because it is faster than her trying to find it herself. It's kind of expensive for IBM. So we moved on in my mid-career, let's call it, we moved on to task-based documents. It was a revolution. We're like, wait, let's think about the people who use our stuff. Maybe we should think about what they're trying to do and what their goals are and what their jobs are. Let's imagine a user as a job description and give them a document that's just for them. We'll have an installation guide, we'll have an admin guide, we'll have a user's guide. We might share a few pieces of information between them, but it turns out that the people who install it and the people who use it in any kind of large corporate setting are not the same people. So we don't need to be telling these people how to run it, and we don't need to be telling these people how to install it. It was great. We created personas and used them to describe tasks. I was working at Microsoft during the Vista push, and we had a name for the IT admin user. We called him Ichiro. And there were pictures of these people. And so there was like Ichiro in sort of a professional IT admin kind of, he didn't have a beard, but he was otherwise, the 1999 admin guy. Or sometimes he was wearing a baseball uniform because it was Seattle, so either way. And so we had this amazing ability to talk about that. And the great thing about task-based documents is they're super thoughtful about the user. And they're modular and easy to single source. And you can use them with all sorts of cool emerging tools. Like I did this thing with Eclipse where you plugged it into XMetal and it would output like these document structures for you to fill in based on what the developers were doing in Eclipse. It was really cool. But these are not connected in a document structure. There's no through line. There's like the task, and then there's another task. And you can sort of cross-reference them, but it's not strongly linear to say, these are all the tasks that you need to do to accomplish what it is you're trying to get done today. They're hard to search and discover, and they are seldom well indexed because we pick the task name and we might index the task name in a natural language way, but probably we don't get into the nitty-gritty of it because it's so small and so easy to forget to index. Also, pure task-based writing is rigid in the type of information that you present. You just do the task. You're not doing any of the meta information, any of the why or the how. You're just saying, this is how you do it. So the thing I've been seeing lately, which I'm kind of excited about, is what I'm calling guerrilla documentation. We've been talking all around guerrilla documentation here. This is what users do for themselves when we have failed them. The most useful documentation I've ever used in my life was the Framers L list. It was a mailing list full of FrameMaker geniuses. It was amazing. You could say things like, I don't know how to wrap a frame around this. And they're like, well, that command is actually escape, MP. Don't press them all together. Press them in sequence. It works perfectly, by the way. It was just coded into my fingers by now, escape, MP. But that was not really in the documentation, or if it was, I never found it. So this guerrilla documentation, this mailing list that was only semi-supported by Adobe, was the best documentation you could find on Framers. Today, we have slightly more codified sources like official and unofficial user forums and Stack Overflow and communities, and we're really working to support our users by giving them some place to put their guerrilla documentation that we can watch out. Guerrilla documentation is awesome because it is user-created. This is what they care about. They care so much that they took time out after they figured out how to do it to tell other people how to do it. That's amazing. And it's relevant to real needs. Nobody figures out how to do something if it's not something they need to know how to do. And it may surprise you. They may have some kind of whack-ass workaround that you would never have thought about in a million years because you're too close to the source. So this is all great. Like, they're coming up with all of this awesome novel information, but it's stale. It's uncontrolled. You don't have any way to make sure that they are not distributing harmful information. Not just wrong, but imagine if somebody puts up, say, an Android patch for a problem that is actually destructive to the data. It could easily happen, and it would tarnish your company's reputation, even though it's not your fault that it got put out. It would still have your name attached to it. And in order to get this information, a lot of people have had to leave your ecosystem. What if somebody says, wow, I'm really having trouble using this program, but I went to Stack Overflow to ask how to use it, and the first 3 people said, don't use that program, use the competition. So you've lost them from your ecosystem, and you don't know how to get them back. And sadly for them, there's a lot of noise in that signal. I have tried to find answers to my questions, and it's just, you go through like 8 questions before you finally figure out which is the one you're looking for. So I propose that we take the best of breed from all of these. We're going to use them in something I'm calling Searchfirst writing. We're going to take indexing from the table of contents style document, modular writing from the Taskbased document, and user need-driven documentation from guerrilla writing. We're going to end up with something that's super responsive to user needs. And it's going to be self-triaging because we already know what people are asking for. It's going to be born searchable. Since it comes out of search, it's never going to leave the area of search compatibility. And because it's so searchable, it's made for cross-referencing. Tags and keywords, in their best form, contain words that never appear in your document or your software. They are the words that people are actually using to look up information. Blue screen of death never appears in Microsoft documentation. But we all know what I'm talking about. The spinning beach ball is not really a thing that you can search official documentation for, but you know what it is. Ideally, you wouldn't be using the terms that already appear in your documentation. You would gather them from users who are looking for things. Frequently asked questions actually have to be asked. You would find these questions in failed searches, in Google queries, and forum questions, and you would realize that although you think of this feature as the queuing engine, people on the ground call it the queue management engine, and the searching is not working. So when you tag, you would use queue management system as one of your tags, as one of the huge cloud of tags that you would put around your instructions. Your tag cloud should look like a thunderstorm, because all you need to do is point people into your documentation to make them happier. Your users are out there developing their own folksonomies for your product, and the names for the things that you have made vary by region and even by company. All it takes is one influential person to call your product something else, and that is how it is known at that company until the end of time, even after they leave the company. So, how are you going to do it? Well, first, think about how a writer at Adobe should have handled my Y2K problem. First, they should find a solution. Like, maybe we should have patched that a little sooner than the 4th, which is, I think, when the patch actually came out. And then we should put it into a top-level news list and push it out to users. Hi, I just thought you want to know. We've got a fix for a problem you may not even know you have yet. It's great. Provide the verified patch within your ecosystem so people aren't running around the internet trying to download things that might be a fix and might be a problem. There was a while out there before the official patch came out where everybody was setting their computer time back, which, while effective, is not really what you want associated with you. And you want to cross-reference all the keywords you see getting used. You should be on Stack Overflow going, my frame maker froze. You should find out who is using those terms and all of the terms that you would never come up with and apply those to your tag cloud. So, for you guys, a from-scratch solution, go home, ask your tech support team which one call they get the most. What is the most boring, repetitive, I can't believe I have to answer this question again, and then answer it. And then search networks for related terms, because they're not just calling tech support, they're talking to each other, they're posting on forums, they're saying, I don't get this thing. So find all of the phrases that refer to I don't get this thing. Tag and publicize your answer, and then see what happens. When I did this, when I started at my current company, I went to tech support and I said, what's the one thing you hate most? And they're like, oh, there's this form. There's this form, and we send it to people, and they handwrite on it, and fax it back to us. I'm like, you're kidding, right? They're like, no. So I made them a fillable PDF form so that people could type in it and email it back to them. And their call volume decreased by 4% because they weren't getting sort of write-os. Their number transition was much smoother, and 4% is huge. Like, If you could take 4% of your tech support calls off, you would be a hero to tech support forever. Unless, of course, you are tech support, because everyone is answering the phones. Then you're going to gather, those are the two examples that I want you to have. So gather data. Gather it from tech support, gather it from user communities, from Stack Overflow, from conferences, wherever you can, figure out how people are complaining about this. Use your inbound search log. Anyone who has a blog knows that there is the most random collection of inbound search terms in the world, but in there somewhere, there are useful inbound search terms that people are using and not really getting an answer. Make it your answer that they're getting right away. Then we're going to triage based on normal distribution. Look, normal distribution, it's a mathematical thing. We call it the bell curve. If instead of answering questions based on what you think people want to know, you took the questions that you have charted out from your research and answered that top of the hill, you would make so many more delighted users so much faster. Just start taking off the top of that hill. It gets harder the further you go out toward the end, but it turns out that most of the questions in the middle are actually relatively easy to answer. So if you're delighting those users, you are maximizing your return. Then you're going to have to write the docs. Make them pithy. Like, concise is one thing, but I just like pithy better because it gets right to the heart of it. You just want how. That's all you want. Like an orange. Make it pithy. Respond to a specific question, even if it's not a task. Sometimes there are questions that get asked over and over again that can't be responded to by a task, but are in fact important, like conceptual issues that people are not getting that influence how they use your software. Index and tag the heck out of it. Make your storm cloud and make sure that it's distributed. Hire one of those search engine optimizers if you have to, but I really think that probably you don't need to. And then fit your answer into a larger structure so that it is discoverable by people who are looking for a good through line on how to use your documentation. Then publish all the time. Stale data is why people ignore us. And if you don't publish all the time and if you don't put a date on your documents, you end up like Heroku. Have you heard this story? They're one of our sponsors, so I feel sort of bad about it, but it is just about the best example I've ever seen of why you need to be on top of what you are doing all the time. They sort of let a cloud platform as a service lapse, and then they changed how they were doing the routing so it was infinitely less efficient for their customers, all of which was, it's okay, except they didn't change the docs. They changed how they did the routing, and they didn't change the docs. And it took 2 years of undiscoverable poor performance before somebody complained, and Heroku went, oh. And now they have to do a ton of repair, and it's entirely a documentation problem. If they had said, well, we have a little problem and we're going to change to random routing, people would have been, a little disgruntled, but they wouldn't have been flamingly angry because 2 years is a long time to have terrible performance. So your data needs to be relevant, and I love the idea of putting a date stamp on the top of it. This data was fresh in, and then your date. And then you can search on your own data and find out what your oldest data is and decide whether or not it needs review. Make your data discoverable. Make everything discoverable. I hate that I have to hide my documentation behind a firewall. I think it is difficult for the user, and I think it is unreasonable for people who want to learn and discover the product, and I think it's just not open. But that's the way it is. If you can at all do it, encourage your company to get you out from behind the firewall and out where you can be discovered. Take a little time to post on user forums. Become one of those FrameMaker geniuses. It doesn't seem like your job because you're playing on the internet, but it is in fact a great way to reach users and make users into evangelists of your product. This is your best way to contact your power users and the people who are doing a lot of work with your stuff. Search on the problem and answer it for baffled users. Search the way they search, find out where they're going, and answer their problem so that you don't have to explain why they are sad and confused. Answer it and bring them delight. I love it when I get a good answer from a developer who says, "Oh, here's how to solve your problem. I'm glad I could help you." Be delightful. I think most of us got into this business because we are curious, and because we are sympathetic, and because we are analytical. I think we should take advantage of these traits and use them to answer the most necessary questions and explain our awesome products in a user-centered way.
First question.
First of all, I'm in violent agreement with everything you have said. And I'm also a technical writer person, which I think a lot of people here are not, actually.
I think we're running about 50-50, I'm not sure. Yeah, technical writers?
Tech writer.
Yeah, see?
Represent.
Okay. Developer types? Okay. Random others? All right then.
So I feel like you started with maybe a structural question, and then shifted to a research and development solution. But I feel like, and especially the last talk where we were talking about books and indices, I feel like you raised a powerful problem with technical documentation online. And I agree that people search, and that they're looking for short snippets of solve the problem now, get to the solution quickly. But when we're talking about large corpuses of documentation, search does not always get you there. So we're left with the book, and we're left with help systems. And when we have large corpuses of documentation of thousands of topics, we are left with some users who want a narrative for parts of the solution. We're left with pointing people towards narrative sections of documentation that are often structured like books still. And this goes back to yesterday with the gentleman who was talking from Woohoo who was talking about, and he pointed to the MailChimp docs. And I've several times been pointed to the MailChimp docs and had people say, "Why can't your docs be cool looking like this?" And I'm like, well, because we have giant installation and configuration information that requires narrative structure that goes on, but also reference material that is all connected and goes on for many, many, many pages. So do you want to solve all that in the next 2 minutes?
I want to talk about better search.
Right, but there isn't only search. Wouldn't you say there's a role for other stuff?
And TOCing, because we have to have some structure to fit these little snippets into. But I also think we should have a search within feature. Like, I don't want to search on everything. I want to search within installation for Windows. And that's all the returns I want. And that cuts out 80% of the installation for Unix and installation for OS 300 or 400 and all of that stuff. It cuts it out and brings it down to a manageable size. But it's true that in an extremely large document, it's just going to totter and fall over under the weight of what it is if you don't have some kind of structure. And I think the best example of handling that sort of and sort of not is Wikipedia. Like thousands and thousands and thousands of articles, but usually you can find what you want. I'd love to see how writers could do like disambiguation articles. Are you looking for installation for these platforms? Like, you typed in an unclear search term, let me help you disambiguate this and point you toward something better and more useful to you. Does that answer your question?
Is that partly dependent on having an awesome search algorithm?
I think that there are probably solutions out there. I haven't done a ton of research in it. Yeah, the guy from SwiftType would like to talk to you about his awesome search algorithm.
So, this is a very complex problem, and unfortunately, we're very over time, so we can't take any more questions. So
you can find me later.
Yes, she'll be around, and we can talk about this as a group offline. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
So, do you want to handle lightning talks?
Hello, hello, hello. Is this on? Okay.